Welcome to Ask a Curator Day here at the Museum of Fire. Because we had so many questions asked over the weekend during our digital event, we thought we'd take part in today. So Ask a Curator Day is actually a worldwide event, so we're really excited to be a part. This is the first time the museum's actually been a part of it. So for those of you who don't know us, I'm Belinda McMartin and this is Laura Anderson, and she's our curator here at the museum. So we're going to answer some of your questions. Thank you to those people who have already asked questions. If you do have a question that you want to ask that we don't answer, please put it in the comments. And throughout the day, keep sending us questions because we'll try and answer them as well. So to kick us off, the first question I'm going to throw over to Laura. And the question that's been asked is, what does your typical day look like?
So every day is different. Usually it involves some sort of form of research, doing heritage inquiries, looking into the stories that make up an object's history, everything. Anything that you can think of being in a museum that we have stories about, that's what I look at.
Excellent. The next question is, what do you love about your job?
I think it's finding the pieces of information that we wouldn't have known otherwise, and we can piece together a story about the life of an object, which is always, that's the most interesting part.
For me as well, I really love the telling of the stories. I think the stories are the important part, and it's great that we get to do that in this job. The next question is, what's your favourite object?
So I'm quite new in the role, but this remotely piloted aircraft system, or a drone, I know a lot of information about this, so it's come to be one of my favourite objects. So this one was named after the first chief officer, which was William Douglas Bear, and it was brought into the Fire and Rescue New South Wales Department in 2015. So it is an old piece of technology, but it forms an important part of the fire and rescue history.
And I think what's great about this particular item is that it's not a fire engine. And most people think of the Museum of Fire as just being full of fire engines. Obviously we're sitting in front of a lot of fire engines, but we have other things like this in our collection. So even if you're not interested in fire engines, there is so much more that we have here. And items like this just go to show the different parts of Fire and Rescue New South Wales and the different parts of the brigade that are actually out there. And we really love, as we said, telling stories and sharing that particular part. So that's a great object.
So exhibitions are a huge part of the role as well.
And we're actually hoping to get a new exhibition up that will be featuring the aviation section of the brigade, and also obviously this drone. So hopefully we can get that up soon. As a not-for-profit registered charity, obviously we rely on people coming through the door. So that's why we encourage people to come through the door, because the more people that come through the door and visit us, obviously the more money that we can receive, and then we can put that back into exhibitions and revitalise the museum. So the next question that someone's asked, and this is probably a very relevant question, is how have you actually done your job during the COVID-19 pandemic? Now, I might jump in and answer that one straight away, because obviously being a curator, and that's probably one thing we haven't talked about yet, which is what a curator is, given it is Ask a Curator Day, we probably should have said that first. In a nutshell, a curator takes care of a museum. They take care of the collection. As I said a few weeks ago, they are the unsung heroes of the museum. You don't really see them very much, but they're the ones that are really the backbone of the museum and doing a lot of the work. Obviously, they're heavily collection-based in their roles, so it's a really valid question in saying, how can you, during the pandemic, work when you're not with your collection? During the pandemic, I was still a curator, and I actually found myself having to work from home, but obviously my collection at that particular time was nowhere near me. So what I was actually doing was a lot of digital collecting, so that was processing photographs, processing documents, things that you can obviously do from home, things that are digital. At the same time, a lot of collection management software, so that's the things that we use to take care of our collection, are obviously digital and available online. So even if I didn't have a physical object in front of me, I was able to do a lot of work and research for those objects. During the pandemic, I did have to go into the museum occasionally to physically see the items, but I was able to sort of direct my time so that I didn't have to get out and about that much. But even though the pandemic was obviously happening and we were all at home, work still continued basically like normal.
And I just wanted to jump in saying, because we're such a small organisation, we're also the ones that got the museum back up and running. We have a small team and everyone works together to do this. So we've created the COVID safe plans, all of that sort of legislation that we needed to go through. Yeah. So that's another part of the role. It's a bit of everything.
Yeah. In a small organisation such as ours, everyone basically has to do everything, and the curators in a lot of ways are similar to what you probably think a manager does, because they are overseeing the day-to-day activities of the museum. The question we've been asked is, how do you go about getting a job in a museum?
So I think Belinda and I have both come from similar backgrounds in terms of study, both from Sydney University doing the Master of Museum and Heritage Studies course. For me, I did a lot of volunteering before I came to work at a museum. It's just part and parcel of getting that experience that you need. And internships,
I was going to say internships. I was very lucky in that my internships helped develop into jobs very early in my career. So unlike Laura, I probably didn't do as much volunteering, but definitely volunteering is a great way to get your foot in the door. Obviously studying is a major part. I did 5 years at university, so it's a long time to study, but in the end it's worth it. The next question is an interesting one. It's a bit more of a personal question, and the question is, do you collect anything yourself? Now, I have always said that curators make the worst collectors out there because they know how to do it right. My family will be the first to tell you that that is absolutely true. If I'm going to collect something, I'm going to collect it incredibly well. So I've sort of had to ban myself from collecting things, because if I get one or two, I feel that I need to have everything. I recently built a new house, so I've actually had to downsize a lot of my collections because I didn't realise how many things I did collect. So yeah, I think curators make both the best and the worst collectors out there.
Definitely, I would say the same thing.
Yeah. Why did you become a curator is our next question.
So I've always loved museums, libraries, the quiet places. Obviously they've changed, and that's probably one of the best things about it. You can see the museum has evolved, but it's being here and being able to tell the stories that otherwise may not be heard. That's what does it for me.
I agree. I'll also be honest and add an extra element to that. I always knew I wanted a job in history. It really didn't matter what kind of job I got in history. I knew I wanted a job in history. And while you're at university, you spend a lot of time studying history, but there's not a lot of emphasis upon what you actually do with that. I guess one of the reasons I went into museum studies was because I could see it as a practical application for what I was learning. Obviously, it's great to be a historian, but if there's any students out there, they'll be the first to tell you that becoming a historian is one of the hardest jobs out there, because there's not a lot of historian jobs. However, museums are quite tangible. So I always saw a museum as a tangible way to share history. So one of the reasons I became a curator was because I could honestly see practical job applications.
And that's important.
That's incredibly important, because you can't live on 2-minute noodles your entire life. So yeah, that's one of the reasons I became a curator. Another really interesting question was, have any items in our collection gone viral? And actually during the pandemic we did have an item go viral. It was actually a photograph, and I'm not sure, I think we printed it out, we were prepared. I don't know if anyone can see that, but it's a photograph of what was the Harvey Norman Superstore fire, and that took place back on the 24th of February 2012. Now, we don't know how, but it was shared on our Facebook page years ago, so it wasn't a current post. Someone picked up this post and it went viral all over different social media platforms that honestly I didn't even know existed. In the photograph, obviously it shows the fire, and there's our our advertising sign that says Museum of Fire, next exit. So it is quite a comical photo, but it went viral, and we received hundreds of people commenting and sending us emails and messages saying, is the Museum of Fire okay? Is the Museum of Fire still standing? I didn't know it was going viral at the time, so when I started getting these messages, and obviously being at home, I had a moment of, oh my gosh, what's happening? To see the photo, I was obviously quite relieved because I recognised it, and as a result we had to do a Flashback Friday explaining that it was not at the moment.
The museum's okay.
The museum was okay, and ironically we were actually getting ready to reopen. So it probably worked quite well for us that it went viral because it got the word out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's probably the only one I can think of at the moment.
Okay, I might ask this one. What's your favourite museum to visit other than the Museum of Fire?
Well, we both obviously really like visiting museums. So for us, we probably would say all of them. Whenever anyone asks me that, I always say there's this little Pearl Museum in Tahiti, which it's small. Obviously, I don't think it has a large budget, but it always resonates with me. But if we're going to stay local, I'm incredibly biased when I say this because I've worked there, but the Bradman Museum is somewhere that I quite enjoy visiting. I know you've got something even more local than that you like visiting.
Well, I'm based in Penrith, and the Penrith Regional Gallery in Lewis Bequest, it's an amazing gallery. Yeah, and they have a suite of exhibitions which change over 4 times a year. So definitely worth a visit.
And obviously so are our major museums. We both really enjoy the Museum of Applied Arts and Sciences, which is obviously the powerhouse. Maritime Museum's obviously another one that I really enjoy as well. And we've obviously got a lot of friends that work in those places too, so it's great that we get to share in their museums just as much as they share in ours. So that's great. We have 2 more questions that people sent to us this morning. So the first one, and I'm going to send this one to you, Laura, was how are you collecting the digital world?
So Belinda kind of touched on this when she talked about what she was doing during the pandemic, when she had to work from home, but including as well as our physical collections. So we have a number of collections, from the library through to archives, so many, and of course the vehicles and objects that we have. But a huge collection that we have is also the digital collection, which includes a digital photographic archive and also documents. And we collect these as they become available. We digitize photographs for people as well, and they just sit in our digital archive that we can draw on. Yeah.
So we've got one more question that we're going to ask. So again, thank you for joining us for Ask a Curator Day. We've actually launched a digital excursion program as well today, so this has all been a day of firsts for us anyway. Digital first days. We actually thought this question was funny, so thank you to the person that asked it. Which superpower would be most useful as a curator? Time travel. There are so many things that we have to use research, or we have to try and deduce what the actual story or the content behind it is. So definitely, if we had time machines, it would make our job a lot easier. It'd also probably make it a bit more interesting sometimes because we'd get to go back to the time. But yeah, obviously that's not going to happen anytime soon, so we've just got to keep using our research skills. Again, thank you very much. That's it really from us. And if you do have any questions, please send them through and we'll try and answer them before the day's out. So thank you all. Questions we've been asked is where we get our funding from. Obviously, as I said, as a not-for-profit registered charity, we rely on people coming through the door, but we do actually receive some grant funding. We obviously have to apply for the grant funding, we don't just get it, unfortunately, but one of our most recent grants that we were successful in was from Veterans Affairs, and that was to create this wartime wall. Here we talk about basically what happened during World War II and the role that the New South Wales Fire Brigade played in it. So that's the role that they played in the creation of the Darwin Fire Brigade, and it also includes the Women's Fire Auxiliary.
So we got a question asking what sort of model the drone is, and it is a DJI-1 Inspire model.
So someone's just asked what my favourite item is because I skipped the question while we were doing the live cross. One of my favourite items is actually the crane, which is what I'm standing in front of. And the reason I love the crane is because when it came to the museum, it was in a completely different state to what it is now. It's been completely restored by our volunteers. It's also, we believe, the only one that has been restored and still in basically working order. And our team here received a Heritage Award because of the great work that they've done. So for that reason, I actually really love this item.